com. Okay, for the next 50 minutes, we're joined by Dr. Jerome Corsi here as we simulcast at prisonplanet.tv with a radio show. And he wrote an excellent article back in 2007 at WorldNet Daily. We were covering it simultaneously here from the SPP documents that Judicial Watch and others had sued to get of the North American Union body. And they kept saying, we're going to use pandemic flu, economic crises to bring in the North American Union, but this is secret from the public. We've got to keep this secret from the public. And they went over how the World Health Organization under this treaty agreement with Mexico and Canada would be in charge. Now we see that in the news. Mainstream news is now reporting what we reported and what Dr. Corsi is reporting, that this is the great time for the New World Order and globalism because it is now out in the open. So to break this down and his overall take on this fear-mongering distraction that's been used to get all the other real news out of the headlines is Dr. Jerome Corsi, best-selling author and writes for WorldNet Daily. Doc, thanks for coming on with us.
Hi, Alex. Great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, let's go back to that article you wrote in 2007, which is almost like prophecy with what actually happened.
Well, in 2007, there was the Security and Prosperity Partnership up in Montebello in Quebec, Canada. I was there. And what came out of that agreement was out of that meeting was a new agreement that was signed by Canada, the United States, and Mexico, which was a North American plan for avian flu and pandemic influenza. And what the document agreed to was that if there was going to be an outbreak of avian flu or any pandemic influenza in North America, we, the United States, and the Canada and Mexico would handle that outbreak under the United Nations law. And I documented that there is, in fact, the United Nations has a coordinator, a UN System Influenza Coordinator, who's Dr. David Nabarro. I believe he still is Senior Policy Advisor to the UN Director General. And the United States has been moving in this direction for some time. In 2005, President Bush had announced a new international partnership on avian and pandemic influenza. It was at a high-level plenary meeting at the UN General Assembly in New York on September 14, 2005. So it's quite clear that North America has a plan for handling these health emergencies, and the plan is to go under the Blue Helmet rule. What it means, essentially, Alex, kind of breaking it down, is that the United States is no longer sovereign over health emergency situations. That's the bottom line. Are you there, Alex?
Yes, I know it's rare for me to actually shut up and listen to you. I'm just listening to you go over it. Please continue.
And in fact, the agreement is still on the SPP website. If you take a look at the SPP, www.spp.gov, and you search for the Montebello Conference, until very recently, and I think it's still there today, you can read the agreement that was signed. So, I mean, it's clear that this is an international agreement, and that President Bush has made U.S. management of a true pandemic situation subservient to international law.
Now, I want to expand on that because, I mean, it's one thing to read you writing about this a couple of years ago from the documents. You know, you and I and others have researched it. We know it's true. It's another thing to see Reuters, you know, with UN in control of global pandemic, UN telling Mexico, U.S., Canada, Europe, China what to do. This is more just acclamation, and that's part one I want you to comment on. Then part two, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, all, yes, martial law is a good thing. Forced inoculation is a good thing. We may lock down U.S. cities, but we're going to leave the borders open. How ridiculous is that?
Well, and as I pointed out, by the way, it is on the spp.gov website. I just found it under the Montebello Conference. So far, this whole swine flu outbreak has turned out to be completely a minor event. And there's very few cases of it. The cases that are found in the United States are not lethal. They're able to be handled by various kinds of antibiotics that we have on the shelf. The cases that are in Mexico are occurring because Mexico is largely a third world country, and there aren't even good sanitary conditions in much of Mexico. So Mexico is going to be more prone to having an outbreak like this. be a little bit more virulent. But even in Mexico, there aren't very many cases. So far, I'm categorizing this as just a scare. It's an hysteria. Now, what it does reflect, Alex, is when you look at it, look at the amount of media attention, the going to one of the top levels for the World Health Organization to declare that this is a pandemic. All the quarantining that's going on in Mexico, the preparations are clearly in place for the governments in North America to use a pandemic fear, saying, oh, it's 1918 again. There's going to be 30 million people that die worldwide, like happened at the end of World War II with the flu that spread across the world at that time.
World War I, yeah.
World War I, 1918. But there's no evidence whatsoever that this current outbreak is any more than hysteria.
Well, Doc, I didn't know what your view on this would be, but it's identical to mine.
Yeah.
Day one, I said this is a hoax, this is a fraud, but they're using this as a beta test to prepare for martial law. And then they've basically come out and said that we know a mega flu is coming in the next 6 months or so, the head of Homeland Security said, and others. And this was a good drill for us. And, we are going to have to forcibly inoculate you and lock down cities. This is perfect to have this while society collapsed, while the offshore banks, now Bloomberg reports, have stolen 14 plus trillion. It's now over 12 trillion. Last time it was 12 trillion. Every few months we learn the next, horrible number, over $1 trillion a month. In the last 6 months since the banker takeover, it's now 14 plus trillion in what they've committed to or spent. And this is a perfect cover. Now, every time a nation rebels or resists, we got to lock everything down. A flu popped up, whether it kills people or not. I mean, this is amazing.
Well, also, Alex, one of the other parts of this that is important to note is that it's been accepted in the mainstream media that all of this is just normal. In other words, the possibility of government coming in and shutting down schools, of issuing quarantines, even possibly martial law or sequestering people who show up as being somehow or other showing symptoms of this disease.
No, they've been setting up the tent cities. They've been setting it, exactly, and acting it's a dry run. Do you think this is a dry run?
It certainly has the characteristics of being a dry run because, this much hysteria. I know it's an hysteria at this point because the cases aren't developing. We've had everybody scared, and, including my own family, frightened to death that this is going to be something that, we need to take exceptional measures over. And truthfully, there's been one death in the United States from this entire
and that was somebody from Mexico City.
From Mexico City, we've got 300 million people now in the United States, and we have one death of someone who came from Mexico City, and yet we have nightly news reporting and the White House coming out with special announcements. We have the military involved. I also, Alex, have done a series of reports on U.S. Northcom. And U.S. Northcom, which is a combatant military command that is tasked with handling U.S. emergency situations. And U.S. Northcom has drilled and done exercises on pandemic influenza outbreaks. So the preparation's all there.
Yeah, stay there. Recap that when we come back. I mean, you wrote the book on this 2 years ago, and now it's happening. And then I said last Saturday, now 8 days ago, I said, watch. They're going to say, this thing's going to mutate. It's in the fall. We may need martial law. And that's now what they're saying. And these guys are so predictable. Dr. Corsi, stay with us.
You worry. If you don't understand the situation. Hi, summer's coming, and now's the time to learn self-sufficiency. If you're going to eat from nature's bounty of wild edible plants, remember, there's a learning curve. Experience is the best teacher, but that means time. To speed it up, you'll need to build on the wisdom of a teacher who has lived it. Author Linda Runyon is that teacher. Her Wild Food Knowledge Package is the crash course. The DVD gives you a 3-hour overview of her world directly from her. The book gives you an in-depth reference with all of the insider know-how you'll ever need. And her wild cards are your portable summary and cheat sheet for your field work. This 3-pronged learning system will take you from spectator to scholar to gourmet survivalist in weeks, not years. Folks, I can vouch that Linda's the real deal. She's my mom, and I watched her do it. So go to ofthefield.com or call 888-51-EAT-FREE. Start now. Knowledge is power. Better take action. I think a storm's coming.
Are you tired of losing your hard-earned